everybody. I'm Kristin Messerli, and I'm excited to be hosting today's call. Dave had another engagement.
Hi, Kristin. We just lost your audio.
Okay, hold on just a second.
There you are.
Okay. Okay, sorry. I'm trying to figure this out. I had a conference room reserved. Yeah, had a conference room reserved, and they did not have Wi-Fi. So now I'm shifting over here at this coffee shop. Marcy, can you confirm that you can hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started. And as I mentioned before, I am really excited to share a little bit today. I'm sure many of you on the call saw the interview that Dave did with Donald Miller. I am a huge fan of Donald Miller. He wrote the book on creating your story brand. And so, so I've done a lot of presentations actually over the last year on how to craft your story and how to communicate in a way that really connects with first-time homebuyers, particularly millennials, and just thinking about any kind of crossing over any kind of cultural or generational barrier to make sure that you are able to connect with your with your market. And I think the formula that he uses is just really on point. So if you haven't already used that, then or read his book, I would encourage you to do that. So I am going to confirm one more time, Marcy, that you can hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Okay, if we just let me know if you can ever hear again. Or okay, so that someone asked about the name of the book. I'm blanking on it, but it's something related to Storybrand, and his name is Donald Miller, the author. So I think it's like building your story brand or something like that. So I'm going to share my screen here. As always, jump in with any questions, comments. I love these coaching calls because they are really open with the community and an opportunity for us to be able to share and drive real conversation. So I'm going to present a little bit, but we can take this call in any direction that you guys want it to go in. I'll just share some information on how I talk about building your story brand and how that relates to reaching first-time homebuyers, and then we can open up the conversation from there. So first of all, I want to frame the conversation around the first-time homebuyer market. 1 in 3 homebuyers are millennials. This is something that we talk a lot about, and if you've ever heard me speak, you've heard me speak on that. The fact that millennials are a generation that brings a new set of experiences and expectations to the table, and it's important that you really understand what resonates with this audience. Also, millennials are extremely diverse. Over half, or nearly half of millennials are ethnic minorities, and coming from all different kinds of backgrounds, and that's where we're also seeing a huge amount of population growth. And then lastly, thinking about single women, as they make up the second largest cohort of homebuyers. And I really think a lot of our messaging and branding is traditionally very masculine. And so if we are continuing to communicate in the way that we've always done it before, we're missing these 3 huge markets when we're talking about first-time homebuyers. So the future of mortgage and everything that whether you're adopting new technology or you're updating your customer experience or its marketing, we have to think about how does it affect, how is it going to resonate with these particular buyer segments. So it is building a story brand that someone just mentioned here. Okay. Homeownership has declined in young adults. This is also something that I think is frequently talked about, and there's a variety of reasons that I think most of us on this call probably are very aware of that I'm not going to get into today, but it does create an opportunity to really connect with this audience there's a huge amount of this population that is ready for homeownership and doesn't know who to trust, doesn't know who they can or how to start the process. And that's a lot of what I want to focus on when we talk about messaging, is building trust and building a kind of transparent process in sharing what the home buying process looks like. And so I'm going to skip on down to cultural outreach. Just as a background, I'm the founder and CEO of Cultural Outreach. We work with lenders primarily in reaching underserved markets and millennials, so the first-time homebuyer markets that we've been talking about. And we've identified in working with lenders all across the country on, strategic consulting strategies and developing content, that there are 3 areas that are most important to think about when you're reaching these segments. One is education. So being that educator, being that guide, that is something we talk a lot about in the mortgage coach community. Secondly is connection. So connecting with your consumers, whether it's through social media or hosting an event or being involved in the last area, which is partnerships, being involved with specific partners that are reaching these segments. Maybe they're nonprofits, maybe they're young professional organizations or WeWork locations, but organizations that are already connected there. And so for the purposes of this call, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking more about how to communicate your brand in a way that really builds that connection and helps people to see you as an educator, as a guide. One of the things that we have put out as something available for loan officers specifically that I want to share with you is an individual subscription to our content. So most everything we do, we work with on the kind of corporate side or enterprise level, but we recently, just a couple months ago actually, made our educational content available for loan officers. So you can subscribe there and you can try it out for free actually, with video content, infographics, even lunch and learn slide decks, and just various pieces of content that that are really targeting these populations. Now, even though I talk a lot about sharing kind of educational content and how important that is, really I think most important that you are very authentic to yourself and you're communicating personally in these areas. So people know that you're an educator because you're always willing to talk to people and respond to common questions or any questions that they have, that you're someone that's responsive and that they can count on to be real with them and be transparent with them. And so that leads me to talking about how you craft that personal story. And again, we're going to dive into a kind of a roadmap that Donald Miller laid out, and then how that could relate to you specifically as a loan officer. And I want to remind everyone to hop in with questions, comments at any time, and I'll take a couple breaks here. But now I'm going to start walking through what that roadmap looks like according to Donald Miller, and then what that can look like for you as a loan officer building your personal brand, specifically in the area of messaging that connects with first-time homebuyers. So again, if you have not seen this amazing interview, I am kind of a fangirl about Donald Miller, so it's maybe my perception, but I do think this is extremely valuable, and it's 20 minutes. So in his book, this is what he is, okay, this is what he describes. He describes as how to build your story brand. First, there is a character, and he has a problem, and then that character meets a guide who gives them a plan and calls them to action. That either helps them to avoid failure or ends in a big success. So this is what he calls the story and the plot of the story. And there's 3 major plots, major steps to a great story. One is the consumer is always the hero. And I think that's something that Mortgage Coach does a really great job of focusing on. There has been a huge shift in the way consumers are approaching any kind of professional. especially a loan officer, they're no longer going to a loan officer and saying, you take care of it. Going to the loan officer and wanting to be decision for themselves. And I think that really plays into this key component of that story. You may be, as any great guide, truly paving the way for them, but they feel that they are the hero of their own story. They are making the right decision for themselves. It's because you laid out this very transparent process and you made it possible for them. You were a guide in that hero story. So that's a big component that we'll talk a lot about. Secondly, the hero is moving toward a goal. And third, the hero's journey should intersect with your brand or mission along the way. That one is I have a worksheet that I put together that is kind of along these lines, and I'll make that available to you guys. But also, you can just kind of follow along here. So if you want to write these down or spend some time thinking about what your story brand is specifically, I'm going to give you some options as ideas that I think would be great, but then you want to personalize it for yourself. Okay, first is, what's your movement or purpose? So this is going to clarify the whole point of the story. And for the purposes of our conversations, it's going to be all about helping people build wealth and community through home buying. And what's important to think about here is that, I think something actually Donald brought up on the call, or maybe it was Dave, but we tend to get very caught up in talking about numbers or units, and for the home buyer, that is not something I necessarily am going to be attracted to. In fact, if I hear a loan officer talking about how many loans he did that month, I'm just, very turned off by that. What I want to hear is someone talking about how many families they've helped and how many, what impact they're having. So really making sure that everything around your messaging and your communication is around helping people build wealth, or helping people, build stability, building wealth through homeownership, and getting to their ultimate dream or success goal. And of course, like we talked about, the home buyer is always the hero. And the villain, and this is something that was very interesting in that call with Donald, was that they discussed the fact that by providing mortgage coach and helping people to make these decisions and see a total cost analysis, you are setting up the rest of the mortgage industry or any loan officer that's not using mortgage coach as the villain. And I do think that in surveying, we've surveyed thousands of millennials across the country, and by far the biggest complaint is one, that they just don't know who to trust. If they are going to be able to see exactly what the process is going to look like, they have a transparent process, and they can see exactly what's best for themselves, then they are going to see you as the hero. They're going to feel that the rest of the industry is a villain in a way. There's also other villains that are being brought up, just the wealth gap, or anything related to the opposite of building wealth through homeownership. And then what is the fear? So there's a lot of common home buying myths, and actually if you guys check out our YouTube channel, we have a ton of videos that were released a few months ago. I think I actually came on one of these calls to talk about it, but it is all about the myths of buying, or myths around homeownership. We interviewed several millennials on camera about what their thoughts were on homeownership, what questions they had, and it really aligned well with a lot of the myths that we found across the board in all of our surveys. So we have those on camera. I would encourage you guys to check those out. And there's one major video where you can hear, or primary video, where you can hear people talking about some of that as well. But those are some of the areas that would be a fear. I can't afford a home, or I can't afford a down payment, can't qualify for a mortgage, or I don't know, not sure if they're going to make a smart decision. And what I hear really constantly is that they start to do some research online, and they feel like they are losing that. They're just not able to trust what they're reading or who they're talking to. So of course that creates an opportunity for you. So the hope is that they gain confidence and clarity in the home buying process, and that they're able to create a planned homeownership with a mortgage professional. Obviously that's you come in to bring hope, and you become basically the home buying Sherpa or the home buying guide out what that transparent process looks like, and what it means to for them to be able to trust you. You're not going to tell them that yes, it's absolutely the best time always to buy a home for them. You're going to tell them, show them what their options are, what their cost of waiting might be, and help them to see what the right decision is for them. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the part of really applying this. I want to first, before we go through describing the brand story, I want to share with you an example from a major company that a lot of millennials love. First-time homebuyers. This is unrelated to mortgage, but I think it's interesting to kind of apply this to another industry and then see this in your industry. And this is a pattern that we've seen isn't necessarily exactly in line with the Storybrand principles, but something that we found to be really consistent as a way to build your story or craft your story. So I'm going to talk about Everlane, and this is ethically sourced and fabricated clothing. Their big thing is that when you buy their clothes, you know that you're getting clothes that were ethically made and that they're going to be long lasting. So their big promise is radical transparency. And the reason I chose that is because that mission aligns really well here. I actually feel like their clothes they're pretty expensive because of this promise, but it's a really great example of the story that they're telling. Okay, first is the movement or purpose. So you want to share that movement or purpose, and in this case, it's environmentally conscious and ethical labor. They're very clear in writing that all over their website and about how they believe they can make a difference. Radical transparency is said over and over. I think you can see, actually, I probably should have done this for Mortgage Coach. I think that's a great example. Second is the claim. So the claim is denim you can get behind, the world's cleanest denim factory. And then you want to back it up. So include some kind of statistics or data that support that claim. So you want to not just say this is absolutely the world's cleanest denim factory. You want to explain, back that up. And you've got, let's see, I don't know, they're just like talking about the certification process and all that kind of stuff. And then visualize it. So attaching photos or videos that bring it to life and allow people to really connect with it. And then the competitive advantage is that they are unique and that they are a trusted advisor that are going to, this is taken from a later slide. So the competitive advantage for them is that they are a trusted clothing provider. And then the transparent process. They're breaking things down for the consumer. They're making them feel connected to it. And then the call to action is that they feel comfortable with the brand and they feel excited about supporting that business. Now, overall, this is an example of a social impact business, and over half of millennials say they would pay more for a product or service if they know it has a social impact. So we know that that mission-oriented approach is really effective in communicating your value to millennials and to really that shift in consumer preferences and expectations. So what does that mean for you as a mortgage professional? One, clarify your movement or purpose, which, as we talked about, wealth buying, home buying. And then the claim, helping families build wealth through home ownership. And again, one of the things I thought was so great was instead of talking about I close the most loans or being very transaction oriented, you're family oriented. The consumer is the hero. So I help the most families, and I'm helping them build wealth and build the life that they want. All about that. Yeah, another thing I would mention, I know that Dave has interviewed Simon Sinek as well, and watching his YouTube video about the why is really helpful in clarifying this for you personally as well. Third is to back it up. And so in this case, maybe you want to, you're backing up really with Mortgage Coach, but in your communication and in your messaging and building your story, you may mention something about a typical homeowner will be ahead of a renter by a multiple of 45 on a lifetime financial achievement scale. So I think actually I have an example here. One of the loan officers I follow, Denise Donahue, does a really great job of really communicating that and backing it up with those types of statements. And she's always sharing different scenarios, and it really shows that she's someone that's going to guide you through that process. And I know there's tons of you on the call and in the Mortgage Coach community that do a really great job of that. So I had shared her here because this is the next stage as visual. I think it's always great to personalize things and add photos of real people or real scenarios. I think that's also a really cool thing to share. And then give consumers a look into the process. One of the things that I've been talking about lately is that bookending the home buying experience, because consumers are going to remember the beginning, the end, and anything crazy that happens in the middle. So the two control things that you've got going are the beginning and the end. And so at the beginning of the process, just really set the stage for explaining what the home buying process is going to look like. Like, this is exactly what this is going to look like. This is where we're going. And then another thing that Donald Miller brought up in that interview was not talking over your consumer's head. This is an example that we put together that steps to buying a home. And so you can see exactly what each step consists of. And you may even want to, sometimes we'll cut down some of these steps into one. But just get away from using any kind of jargon. That was one of the things that has come out of a lot of our interviews with millennials too, is that no matter how educated they are, even interviewing Harvard Business School students that just had no idea what was being talked about when we were talking about the mortgage process. And so making sure that you're keeping that jargon very clean, and you're not talking over anyone's head, and you're helping to set that stage. For most people, if they talk to a loan officer, they feel like they can trust you from the very beginning and that you're going to be super transparent, then they're not going to shop around. They don't care about if they're even paying a little bit more to be able to work with you, because they are able to feel confident. And so starting, and then the other side of this is the end, the closing. And even for closing, being able to make sure that going into the closing, they are really confident in what they're signing, that they've been able to be, you've been really transparent through that process. But in the visualization part of your story brand, you want to think about ways that you can communicate that process, or communicate different scenarios in a way that's very visual. Even always doing a video when you send over a TCA. I think that's a great way to really add that visual component for a consumer. This is the competitive advantage. So you are the trusted advisor. You are transparent and personable. and you are way better than your competitors who are doing these fee worksheets. So I think that is a very obvious competitive advantage in this storyline. We talked about the transparent process, but making sure that all of that information, again, is very digestible and very clear, and that you're communicating that in a way that resonates with your audience. If you're working with a lot of Spanish language dominant consumers, then make sure you have educational materials in Spanish. That's not marketing in Spanish. That is educational materials in Spanish that allow them or their parents to be able to very clearly understand that what they're getting into. Or if you're, of course, working with millennials, making sure that you're sharing very visual content and communicating things in a way that is very understandable. And then lastly is the call to action. So making a plan for your path to homeownership. Now, all of these areas, I would encourage you to go step by step and use this as a starting point, but then go from there in personalizing that and making that really authentic to you. And then from there, you can decide how you're communicating that story. So whether that be through any kind of communication on social media or in your customer experience, or if you're converting that into blog posts, everything, or even what your website looks like, everything should funnel through this storyline. So it will just be communicated through different things. Maybe it's an interview with someone, maybe it's a blog post, maybe it's an infographic, but making sure that it is hitting each of those marks as you do that. So before I get into talking about how to tell your story, do we have any questions so far? Let me just check the question box here. Okay. So I don't see any questions. Marcy, of course, jump in if there's anything that comes to mind. If you hopped on the call late, I had to run to a coffee shop because my conference room Wi-Fi went out. So anyway, I may cut this a little bit early just because of the sound issues here, but I am glad that you guys are being patient with me. But I'd love for, if you have any examples of this or any ways that you are doing this, I'd love for you to share that with the community as well. So for now, I'm going to jump into how to tell your story, and I think this will, this is kind of taking everything from what we've talked about to the, okay, coming in loud and clear. So now we're taking the story and actually communicating that out. So first, we've got the authentic stories have the biggest impact. And I think this is important to remember. Even when I was talking about the jargon factor, that may feel, I don't know, you just want to communicate in a way that you know is going to communicate who you personally are. And so if communicating over a, I don't know, certain medium is not authentic to you, you know, maybe you slowly get into that so that everything feels very authentic. I think when a lot of people start out using video, it is something that you have to get comfortable with. It's something like starting to go to the gym. It's very uncomfortable at first. But I think that I'm sorry, it is just so noisy here. Hang on just a second. Okay. People around the coffee shop now. Okay, so it's the biggest impact. All right. So again, communicating your authentic self, whether it's through video or however you're communicating, just make sure it is you that's coming through. Even if whenever you're starting out, it's uncomfortable to be on video, the more that people can, even if they see you mess up or whatever, if you're being yourself, you're trustworthy. You know, I mean, if I know I'm the person and I'm not seeing some, you know, hidden sales pitch, then it's so helpful. Okay, thanks guys for the encouragement on the on the issues of sound here, but glad it's coming through anyway. Okay, so digital technology can really elevate the practice of storytelling. Yeah, as I've talked about how to build your story brand and how to communicate that through any form of communication. You can obviously use that in how you're thinking about your customer experience and communicating to customers. You know, about sitting down with them ahead of time and kind of leading all of your conversations with that mission-oriented approach. But also, how do you scale that? You know, how do you take that to the next level through using technology? And Mortgage Coach is obviously a huge opportunity there. But I think even before whenever you're talking about social media or any kind of CRM strategy, like really using an authentic form of storytelling is going to be very key. I see a lot of social media posts out there that are very turnkey, and I get it. It's getting exposure out there, but it is telling me that a salesperson, either your marketing director or you have just, you're copying or you're a corporate machine in some way. And so making sure that your communication, at least to some extent, some part of your social media strategy or your content is always leading me through that story is really important to making sure that scalable strategy of telling your story is really effective. So first, think about how you choose a medium. And taking your story brand through any of these mediums is going to be totally effective, whether it's thinking about writing a blog or even a white paper. You might think about telling the story of a home buyer that didn't think you could buy a home, but then, you walked them through this process. Again, not a sales pitch, just always as an educational process, guide. So if you are communicating through a blog or a white paper, you want to think about what's my mission, how am I able to communicate, each of those areas through this. If it is coming across salesy in any way, then it's not going to be, it's not falling in line with that story brand that we talked about. So you also might think about even a white paper or something about how, the value of building wealth through homeownership. And there's a lot of articles about when to buy and when not to, but I think your authentic voice and your expertise is really valuable. And I would encourage you guys not to get discouraged in putting that education out there because you think that other people have done it, because that's just what we see in our circles. All the millennials that I talked to, in fact, in this event that we did a few months ago where we brought together 40 millennial homebuyers in the LA area, they were all upper income, at least, six-figure income, and really well educated. And most of them would qualify to buy a home, but had not done that or had not completed that process because they were so uncertain about everything. And I didn't talk to a single person that had maybe there were a couple people that had a loan officer that they talked to, or even a real estate agent. And so a lot of people are just very siloed from that. So putting more education out there through the blog, through going in person to speak at certain things, if people know, like if I am running a young professional organization and I know that you are truly going to be educational and not just try to offer a sales pitch, then I'm going to love to have you in and do at least a few minutes conversation at the beginning of an event. But you have to build that brand first of being authentic and, just being authentic and a guide through this before you can really get your foot in the door around those areas. So each of these, like writing more or doing some videos and podcasting on these subjects will help to build that credibility and tell that story in a way that really resonates with these audiences. And then you can start thinking about how you distribute that. Okay, so outlets for your story. this is a list. I'll make this whole deck available to you guys, by the way, and so you can go back and take a look at this. But and obviously your CRM fits into this. This is something that we have used. I pulled a few slides from something that we've used with non-mortgage people too. So so you can fill this in with mortgage coach and your CRM, all that kind of stuff. On social media, I would encourage you guys to really pay attention to Instagram, IGTV, even for opportunities to say, to share educational content, or maybe do like a 5 or 10 minute explainer of something, or responding to common questions. It's a really great way to tell that story and distribute that to a lot of first-time home buyers. And then, of course, using YouTube and even we're seeing some, I guess, results with Pinterest, but it depends on what you're comfortable with, what you have time for, and where you're able to spend the time and resources. Okay, so we have a question here. Who would you say is an example of someone who is really doing a great job of this? We can view on Facebook. I think that the first person that comes to mind is Denise Donahue. I know there are a ton of others that I could share, but I am it's not coming to my mind. So, but I honestly think a lot of people in the mortgage coach community really do a good job of that. So yeah, maybe I'll do a little shout out to some people later once my brain is chilled out from this chaos of the sound issue. But definitely check out Denise Donahue. She's branded as the mortgage nerd, which I think is really cute, and it helps people to see that she's really going to have the expertise and guide you through that. Actually, if most of the people that Dave interviews too, so check out the Mortgage Coach YouTube channel and take a look at their profiles on Facebook. I've noticed a lot of people keep their Facebook very personal, and I don't think that's a bad thing, because people do business with people. So even if it's just you, with your kids and whatever, that's totally fine, because they see that you're a human being. And but just realize that your consumers are not just going to your business Facebook page. They're going to your personal profile. And so you may want to take that as an opportunity to share some education there, or cross-promote some of the content that you share on your business page, and to make sure you're friending or following everyone that you meet. That's a huge opportunity to be able to share your message and continue to build that story. And remember that your whole story is built on the premise that you believe in prevention. You believe in helping more families build wealth through homeownership. And so if that's the case, you're making friends through all of this. This is not a number. This is not a unit that's coming to you. This is a person with a family, with a dream. And the more that you can build those relationships and see those all as relationships, and so that means expanding your social network to include them, the more business you're going to get, and the more quality referrals you're going to get from that business as well. So we started talking about where people can find your story, but you also want to think about how each of those stories share differently on different platforms. Facebook is going to have different content, and it might be similar, but Instagram is going to be even more visual, in my opinion. It's where a lot of people are on Instagram looking just at stories, and so sharing more story features where you're doing quick little behind-the-scenes type stuff, or a quick tip, but be either very authentic or really well designed. Don't go for in between in there. But Instagram, of course, very visual. I think is a great opportunity. Dave and Mortgage Coach are doing some cool stuff on there. it's fine to share the list type stuff. And in fact, we even give our clients, articles that they can share that's like top 7 things to do when you first move into your house or whatever the types of articles are. But I think that making sure you're mixing that in with a lot of quality, authentic messaging, this story as the prominent piece. And then for blogs really, I think, either need to be one desktop piece, like this is something I want to get a message out there, and when you write that, you should convert that into a video, and you speaking on that, you should be able to pull clips from that video and share those on Instagram and Facebook. And I always feel like blogs are just a nice starting point, but that might be because I like to write, and that's how I get my thoughts out there. Some people start with a video and then move that to a written form, but either makes your blog piece kind of a centerpiece that you're taking content from to move out, or it's something that you're creating a campaign around. So if you're talking through the 10 steps to buying a home, and you have each of those, you're walking through each of those in a different blog post. Again, you can do that with 10-step series on video, and those are great opportunities to share that kind of education. And it's something that just, I know, comes very naturally for you. So I think it's easy for you to be able to really communicate that, and it's easy to time. So I'm trying not to dive too deep into the technical here, but feel free to ask any questions if you have questions about social media or how you communicate this kind of stuff through these channels. And someone did have a question on whether or not you're able to watch the Tuesday webinars, and yes, you can rewatch these. They will be posted to the Mortgage Coach YouTube channel. Okay, so matching the platform to the story, continuing with live stream. I think live stream, you want to be careful with not doing it too much, but certainly every time maybe you're interviewing a real estate agent or a community leader, or you're doing your Friday updates, or I've seen some people do like Friday answers to common questions. Do that live stream. I am totally being hypocritical right now because I just cannot get myself to push that live stream button. But I'm gonna make that a 2020 goal. So I don't ever re-record my videos even. It's just like, it's a nerve-wracking thing. But especially for you guys that are marketing to consumers, the more you can get yourself out there in a really authentic way, the more people are going to believe you and trust you. I have people come up often and say they, start talking to me like they already know me, and then they realize they've just seen me on videos and we haven't actually met in person. And that's what we all want. We want people to, get past the BS and feel comfortable with just automatically trusting us and having a real conversation. So the more that you can do that in an authentic and really consistent way to share that story, it's a great opportunity to do that. Podcasting is also, I think, an untapped opportunity. I don't think a lot of people are doing this or doing it well. So if you can find a way to make it fun and valuable, I don't think anyone is going to want to listen to a podcast that's all about how the mortgage process works, to be real. But I think if you can make it about wealth building and interview different people in different components related to wealth building, that's a cool thing to do, and that's a value add to your audience. So I think that one I would just, unless you're really interested in diving into that, then that could take some time away. The other areas I think are a little bit easier and quick for pulling in new leads. So then, who's talking about your story? Think about people that you can bring into your story that will help share that as well. So collaborate with partners, like if there's a nonprofit that maybe you partner with, this is an example from Rebuilding Together, or an event that you do, and you can tag that event and people that went to that event. But being able to get people to be involved in your story as well. And again, it's not really your story. It is, but it's this mission story. It's the movement that you're working on. And the more that you can bring partners in to join you in that process, the more shares, more exposure you're going to get, and the more of a community that you're really going to build. And I think that's the biggest thing to think about here, and a really great example from Mortgage Coach is how important it is to build a community. So in a community, you have other stakeholders, you have people that you're bringing in, and social media is supposed to be social. So make it something that you're really engaging with other people. You also might even think about partnering with an influencer, a social media influencer. There are, of course, community influencers that are active in a particular market that I am a very big proponent of partnering with. Nonprofits, that's actually what we're doing here in Miami for a lender's meeting with different nonprofits to identify ways to partner and build channels in some underserved markets. And that's the way that you are able to get into underserved markets. But when you think about social media, it's the same kind of thing. If someone has 1 million followers or even 10,000 followers and they're in your market, that's a great opportunity to pay them and to share your message. If you do that, you want to, again, make sure it's all around the story, plugging some kind of educational event or co-hosting, sponsoring some kind of interview or something like that they know you're going to bring value to their audience, and it can be a really effective marketing tool as well. So that's all I want to dive into on the how to tell your story. But if you have any additional questions or thoughts on how you want to, how you craft that story, again, feel free to type those in the question box. And I am going to give you this deck as well as that handout I mentioned before. So we don't have any questions. I may wrap this up early, but I do want to remind you we have a bunch of free resources. I don't think I even mentioned this before. We have free resources at culturaloutreach.com where if you click on free resources, it will go to a whole place where you can find out a ton of information on using social media or reaching young and diverse borrowers and things like that, if you like any of the amount of content that I've shared today, we have a lot more in-depth stuff on that site, as well as handouts and all that kind of stuff. And then not free, but right, we've got our new individual digital content that really is designed specifically to connect with first-time home buyers. It's all educational. It's all with that mission in mind around how to be the guide through this process. I would encourage you, if you do sign up for this, to make it your own and share some of the infographics and videos, or even for the videos, you might record your own video that is following those steps. So it kind of gives you some content to work from that you personalize as well. And then if you have additional questions, you can feel free to reach out to me or connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram, Kristin Messerli, and my email is kristin@culturaloutreach.com. Thank you guys so much for your time and for dealing with the fact that I had to run to a coffee shop to do this. But I am a huge fan of the Mortgage Coach community. Love what you guys are doing. I think you've got a big opportunity to share your story brand. So thanks so much, Marcy.
Thank you, Kristin, for joining us today.